So, Dane, this week I decided to, for no specific reason whatsoever, enjoy the most expensive steak that I've ever had in my life. Perhaps.
How expensive we talking?
Well, I'm not going to brag, but this podcast has only been in the red for since its inception. But we're talking like above 100, below 200. Let's just leave it at that.
So we're talking next tax bracket up style steak here.
Kind of, sort of.
Yeah.
I mean, because I ball like that on a budget. Anywho, it was 40 ounces. And the person I was sitting there with said that I wasn't going to eat all of it.
That person is just a person, right?
Just a person. Has no relationship to me whatsoever. Has not been putting up with my shit for 8 years and is definitely not...
Well, listen, you've said too much.
...contractually binded to me.
You've said too much.
And is my property. Anyway.
Hey, listen, you know what? The government has stepped into that beautiful relationship and sanctioned it. So, you know, it's...
Hey, they made it possible.
That's pretty much the best thing that you
can
possibly
it's just like buying land. Just buying... Anywho, the mouthfeel, Dane, the chewiness. I took the first couple of bites. I was like, I might have bitten off more than I'd chew, you know. And then, before you know it, just a T-bone left, you know.
Was this steak big enough to increase your carbon footprint to a size that the California Environmental Board would probably get upset with you about ordering a steak like that?
I'm saying it probably a 3x3 diameter. Hole in the ozone was probably created by the amount of steak that I just ate.
Very nice.
But I'm
totally worth it.
I'm working my way up to that big Tex challenge in Texas, where you had to eat the 75 ouncer in 1 hour with the potato and all of the shit.
Right.
I'm just getting started.
So overall, considering the price of the steak, was it worth it?
Oh yeah. The cardiac arrest that's going to eventually catch up with me, not necessarily, but. Everything else.
Listen, if it shaved 5 years off your life, so that's 5 years sooner you get off of this fucking crazy train that we got going on here.
5 years less.
They did you a favor.
In the nuclear holocaust that is going to be our future.
Who knows? Maybe you'll check out right before it happens, and you don't have to deal with that.
Maybe I can just see the Flash. Can I see the Flash?
You should have paid double for that.
I want to see the Flash. Right? Yeah. You know what? And if certain people have their way, I will be. That's absolutely true. So anyway. My gratuitous steak story aside, you ready to jump into the episode?
Yeah, I think so. But first, you know, we're going to do our due diligence and give the people the Cliff Notes version.
So double D, as we call it.
So that they know whether or not they want to stick around for the other side of the intro music. So on today's episode of the Culture Corner, we're talking #National Divorce. It was a trending topic on Twitter this past week. And let's just say it got some people to tell on themselves. In the Epstein didn't kill himself segment, we're talking, we're fleshing out a little bit more what we mentioned briefly in the main part of the episode 110, about the Biden speech, and that we think they're probably trying to provoke a response that would then justify them cracking down. And we have a Kathy Griffin tweet. You know,
those are always so juicy. Enlightened.
The mental and moral titan that is Kathy Griffin. She has some things to say about the trajectory of American politics and America in general. And it fits nicely within that theme of trying to provoke you. But we have some historical examples for why you should not fall for the provoking, as well as some best practices for what to do instead so that, you don't wind up on the business end of whatever government apparatus Kathy Griffin thinks she's going to have the reins over.
Tips and tricks, life hacks, call it what you will.
And in the main part of today's episode, we don't really have a current event necessarily to deep dive in on this.
Thank God for once, by the way.
But there's been a lot of things just kind of bubbling up in this general idea of basically going 1,000 miles an hour into progressivism and, thinking that it's inevitable and that tradition is antiquated and we can basically just toss the whole thing out wholesale. We have thoughts about where that could lead us in the not too distant future and why caution caution should be urged. So I hope that I've been vague enough about that to get you to stick around for the rest of the episode. But we're going to talk about all those topics in a little bit more detail coming up right after we jump in. So,
Stay
David,
tuned.
are we about ready to do it?
I just said stay tuned.
Oh,
Stay tuned.
sorry. I didn't know he was going to say that.
I didn't either.
He's saying it now, though.
Stay tuned.
Welcome to Weapons of Human Destruction Podcast, episode 111, which can be found at wmdpodcast.com/111. That's where you can get the show notes to everything we talk about in this episode. You can also get them in the description under the videos on Rumble, Odyssey, and YouTube. And then you can also get the podcasts themselves, audio version only, on any podcast app, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, you name it. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction and look for episode 111.
We out here.
Other than that, you can link up with us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Join the sane space. Become a part of the discussion. Suggest show topics. And basically, we want you to tell David and I why we're beautiful and smart and just pleasurable to all five
And if
senses.
you know the internet, that's all that happens in comment sections.
Everybody's nice to everybody all
Everyone's
the time.
like, have a great day. You as well.
As we're about ready to do in this episode to a few, I guess if you want to call them celebrities, whatever. But that's where to find us. That's where to find this episode. That's where to direct family and friends who are not yet listeners and or viewers to get our content and spread the word about Weapons of Meme Destruction.
If they're watching this episode, they've already found this episode.
I know, but we all want to tell them all the places to direct their friends.
Yes.
They might watch it on
That's where you'll
YouTube,
find this
but they have a
episode.
friend who only wants audio, so they need to know where to send that friend.
Got it. They're more of an earbuds kind of guy, not a listen.
Yeah. Or vice versa.
Right. Whatever floats your boat.
Or maybe
tickles
they
your
just
pickle.
like TikTok videos and they want to say, well, where can I get the long form of these episodes,
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Where can I take this minute segment and turn it into an hour and 50 of my life that I'm never going to get back?
Yeah. At all those places.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't want to know that information?
Yes, of course.
So anyway, leading off the show in the Culture Corner, we are talking #National Divorce, which was trending on Twitter earlier this week. And let's just suffice to say that not only did it get some blue-pilled libertarians to tell on themselves, but some of the other conversations going around about it really gives you basically a read on the pulse of the nation with regards to this big question of which is better, violent union or peaceful divorce. In terms of the blue pill libertarians,
that is so close to marriage too, by the way. Staying together for the kids, but like just fucking hating the other person, or like,
I mean,
that's an amicable marriage where you just both go each other's ways and just say, well, mommy loves daddy and daddy loves mommy, but just in a different way now. And we both love you. It wasn't your fault. But
well, listen, I mean, the marriage analogy is the one that proponents of national divorce, if you want to say the big scary word of secession, we can say that, however you want it phrased. The analogy of marriage is the one that we always use, because when people get in their feelings and they get triggered about the concept of, well, the 50 states as we know them today were like divinely inspired by God himself, and never shall they break up, or else, all of reality might tear and twine.
Don't look into the history about how we acquired those states, though.
When they when people get all in their feels about that kind of stuff, the analogy is a marriage, right? If a spouse were being abused, whether male or female, because men can be abused too.
Really?
Just ask David. Is when the abused spouse says, I don't think this is healthy for me, I would like to go my own way. Anybody that would step in and suggest to them that they're wrong for thinking that, or that they need to just stick it out and all of that kind of stuff would be laughed at and deservedly so. But yet somehow magically, when not even an interpersonal relationship like a marriage, but one where just some people that sit in an office in a suit because they got other idiots to vote for them and tell them that you're a very powerful, important person because you have this office and this title.
And pretty as well.
That none of us are allowed to leave that person's jurisdiction of authority. And that we're crazy for even thinking that that is an option. When you think about it like that, it's incredibly weird that people have this like sort of fundamental devotion and fealty to this abstract concept of the state that should rule all of our lives, no matter how bad the situations get or how much it actually resembles more of a hostage situation.
And you know what's so funny about that is that they're almost nostalgic in that way, is that they say that we need to keep the states together. We need a state a part of this country because that's the way that it's always been since I've been alive, and it's the way that it should always be and forevermore and yada, yada, yada. However, when those same people look back on our history, all they can tell us is about the horrific things that we did to become a country and how they are horrific, and we should be judged and held accountable for all the things that we did to become this country. And we should hold the people that are alive today accountable for the sins of their fathers or their grandfathers or their great-great-great-great-grandfathers. So again, it's that picking and choosing. If you're going to be all in, be all in. Which, if you had those standpoints where like our history is one of diabolic destruction of another human for the benefit of another, then okay, then we need to all go our separate ways because not all of us see it that way. But then when you're walking out of the door, is that, again, to go back to the marriage, baby, come on, don't you know I love you? I just punched you because, you know, you made my sandwich with the cheese on the bottom, and you know I like it on the top, baby. You know I like that cheese on the top. It's got a good mouthfeel. Mouthfeel twice. Go.
Twice in one episode. We're firing on all cylinders.
Been watching too much
tonight.
Food Network over the last 20 fucking years of my life. Anyway, go ahead.
So the first group that I want to target, just to let you know, because I know a lot of people that are newbies to this podcast think, man, they go after the left a lot. Well, you know, refer back to episode 3, Sorry Dims, where we explain why that's the case. But in an expression of total fairness, I want to let you know that we can go after our own as well. We did last week and we're doing it again. Because the first group I want to single out about this basic aversion to the concept of national divorce on Twitter is the blue-pilled libertarians.
Constructive criticism.
And for those of you, you know, maybe that's too inside baseball for you. What's this blue pill, red pill thing, whatever. Blue-pilled libertarians are, in a nutshell, those who are at least nominally, or they profess principles of, say, classical liberalism, right? The ideas of individual freedom, limited government, you know, kind of leave people alone, that kind of stuff. But their North Star is not principles at all. Their North Star is mainstream respectability. More than anything, they want to make sure that the New York Times and the Biden administration and Nancy Pelosi and all of the respectable people, you know, the ones that are doing a fantastic job running the world and informing the people, they want to make sure that that group of people respects them because they're not like those weird neckbeard fedora wearing, you know, sitting in their parents' basement libertarians, those edgelords. They're the respectable suit and tie libertarians. And don't you know, they put up, you know, Gary Johnson or Bill Weld for their presidential and vice presidential candidates. They don't have those weirdos running for office. And because their guiding principle is we want to be respected by all the most terrible, evil, awful people in the world, spoiler alert, the respect's never going to come. But because that's their guiding principle, it leads them to really milquetoast shitty takes. And their take on national divorce is just one of them.
I just want to have a quick little commercial timeout, 30-second break, to say that when you started explaining what that was, I was like, oh, fuck. I think I'm a blue pillar. But then, as you went further down the road, I was graciously relieved of that particular post because I think we've both gone in on Nancy Pelosi and most of the people that you named after that. So I just want to express my relief.
I use those names as proxies for the establishment in general.
So
They want to make sure that all of the official opinion molders like them.
Correct.
And that even though they're libertarians and they're kind of weird in their libertarianness, they're still not like super weird, right?
Okay.
They hold all of the important, they hold all of the correct opinions on the important issues.
They're liberals with like an edge, is what you're saying. Like a little.
No, I'm saying precisely they have zero edge. That's the point.
Well, that's what I mean. Like they're adding the edge by saying, I'm a libertarian. I voted for whoever the fuck the libertarian candidate was, but really I still see eye to eye with the policies, and I'm happy that the Democratic Party won the last election.
Yeah, and they are the ones, they're the libertarians that get outraged over LP New Hampshire, as we talked about on episode 110, getting all up in arms about mocking the McCains and stuff like that. They get upset because that's too abrasive and that's not nice. And, we're never going to be taken seriously if we do that. Well, newsflash, I don't want to be taken seriously by fucking Hillary Clinton or Mitch McConnell.
We've only been at this for like 30 years.
I don't want it. Not only do I not want to be taken seriously by them, I want them to know that I consider them my mortal enemy. So I'm not here to play nice or mince words and say things just the right way so that I appeal to not only Hillary Clinton and Mitch McConnell, but also the legions of mental marginals that are bamboozled into voting for those kind of people.
That are also Americans that we're trying to win the hearts and minds over.
I don't care.
I do. You're more than welcome here on this podcast.
David does, whatever. But but the point is that they come out with these takes like, well, we tried national divorce once and it ended really badly and lots of people died. Well, first of all, that's completely historically illiterate because the concept of the United States as a nation is based on a compact theory of the Union, which is the states created the federal government, not the other way around. And if you create something, you are the one that can destroy that thing. So back to the marriage analogy. The husband and the wife...
Can kill his wife.
No. The husband and the wife created the marriage. If the marriage is no longer working for the husband and the wife, they still have their individual autonomy to be able to say, this union isn't working. We're going to go our separate ways. That is all the federal government is. It is an agreement between the states to create a federal government for purposes of national defense and all that other kind of stuff that, your schoolhouse rock will tell you it's required for. But if at any point one or multiple states decide that this arrangement is no longer working for us, if we in rural Tennessee don't want to pay for the living way too high on the hog of California and New York, well, then we can leave that political arrangement. There's nothing novel or crazy about this. This is the founding of this country. So when they try to posit, either explicitly or implicitly say, oh, we tried that. It's called the Civil War and people died. And then because might makes right and the Union won, then the 50 states must be together forever. That's the kind of milquetoast dumb shit opinion that these people want to share about the concept of national divorce because they want to make sure that the New York Times like them. Well, we are here to say, I don't know, maybe David's not, maybe he wants to massage more people's feelings to try to win their hearts and minds.
I'm just trying to smooth over your jagged edge you're shoving down their throat.
I'm not super interested in it because from my perspective and the perspective of a lot of people, from all over the political spectrum, this political arrangement where a few thousand lunatics in DC are ruling over 330 million of us with an iron fist, that doesn't seem like it's going in a very positive direction. And so if we don't have the broader discussion about national divorce to where we can really get into the nuances of not only the legality of people breaking apart their political unions, but also practically how do we achieve that without bloodshed, doing it peacefully so that there doesn't have to be an exchange of arms. We're never going to have that conversation if, again, Republicans, Democrats, and dipshit, mindless, blue-pilled libertarians regurgitating their talking points are always saying stuff like, we're not allowed to have this discussion because you're not allowed in polite society if you think that any form of secession is justifiable. Let's have the discussion.
All I'll say is that peaceful removal from an agreement was done by Brexit. There were no shots fired. There was no real anything happened other than people are like, I don't know what the fuck we just did, but I think we're going to go through with it. And then all of a sudden they're figuring it out on the post end. So again, it is possible to leave a union without shots being fired. That being the case, it's going to be a sticky situation. But you know, maybe this is the wake up call when you say, hey, I'm going to leave unless you change your shit together. Or change your shit together? Change your shit. Or get it together. Do something. Like, stop doing what you're doing because we're serious. Like, we're not playing around here anymore. Like, it's fun when you have it all going for you and you say, well, oh, those West Virginia, those coal miners, what do they know? They don't live our lives. And then they just keep getting placated until they storm a fucking or the Capitol. And then all of a sudden, how this is the darkest day in our history. It's like, well, you weren't listening to them. And if you don't listen long enough, people will fucking leave. And that's what's being done on a state level. It's gotten so bad. And again, it's not your fault. It's not my fault. It's not his fault. It's the fault of Capitol Hill. They don't listen to anybody else's problems. They placate the ones that they do, and then they make sure that their coffers are lined while they sell away more and more of our rights. And they say, we're doing the best we can. Well, fuck. Like, it's clearly not good enough. So then if this is the best that you can, then we're going to go off and we're going to try to do our own shit. It's like, no, you can't do that. Like, nah, I actually can. So either get it together, Grouch, or we're fucking leaving. And that's basically how I view this particular standpoint.
And I mean, if you take this sort of mentality, that the kind of visceral aversion to the idea of national divorce that these people have, if you take it to its logical conclusion, you wind up with Jennifer Lawrence.
Oh, goody.
Now, Jennifer Lawrence.
The cloud hack? What was it called?
I don't know.
When they hacked the cloud. Anyway, it's not important.
Anyway,
they'll know.
I just got what you were talking about, but I'm not giving it. We were not.
They'll know.
So anyway, she recently sat down with Vogue, and she had this quote, this brilliant quote. She's a real philosopher of our times. She had this to say to Vogue, quote, "I can't fuck with people who aren't political anymore."
That's what, you know what? That's what Plato said too.
Can I even
get
through the
quote? Can't fucks with them. If you don't believe in gravity, I can't fucks with you.
She said,
Sir Isaac Newton.
She said, "I can't fuck with people who aren't political anymore. You have to be political. It's too dire. Politics are killing people." Now, that mentality is exactly why we are in the situation where people are talking about national divorce. In a sane world, there would be massive aspects of your life which are completely apolitical. Like what cartoons you watch or what the characters in your movies are talking about or doing, unless it's, again, a movie inspired by a historical political event. Or whether your child plays with gendered toys or not. All of this kind of stuff should have nothing to do with politics. There should be massive swaths of our lives which are completely outside the realm of politics. And yet, because of this idea that the megalomaniacs sitting in DC need to rule all of our lives and you're not allowed to leave them under any circumstances whatsoever, no matter how much they abuse you or, as David said, ignore you or anything else in between, that is why somebody like Jennifer Lawrence thinks that everything and everybody needs to be political at all times. Well, how has that ended up for cultures and societies that went that direction in the past? Because at the end of the day, politics, as we say with government, it's all it is a monopoly on violence, a monopoly on force. It is one group of people saying we are entitled to force our views on another group of people. And if every single thing in your life is political, if every person that you come into contact with has to have a political opinion on every single thing that is involved in the human experience, you're going to first start out with a soft civil war where all are against all as a matter of policy, and eventually it boils over into an actual civil war. And that's problematic for everybody, No sane person wants it to go that route. But yet, because national divorce is completely off the table, and because Jennifer Lawrence is so wise that she could probably become empress for a day and fix everything, that everybody needs to be political about everything all the time.
She won the fucking Hunger Games, Dane. Show some for goddamn respect. I don't know. I don't know how many times we have to say it on this podcast, but if you are getting your political leanings from anybody in Hollywood, anybody that owns a multi-billion-dollar company, anybody that doesn't live the life that you live, how the fuck could they possibly ever know what is important for you to do? Sorry, I didn't mean to mush mouth that one. But if you think Jennifer Lawrence knows what it's like to work a 9-to-5 job, then come home and raise 3 kids and try to make sure you raise them as well as you can, and maybe you don't have time to turn on the television, or maybe you do, and you turn on CNN or Fox, and you hear it in the background when you hear screaming kids, one pooped their diaper, then the other one started coloring on the walls with crayon. I'm sorry, you are now not a person in Jennifer Lawrence's eyes because you're not political, and it's affecting lives. She's got a lot of free time as an actress. How long has she been, up on Capitol Hill, rah-rahing?
I mean, I think she does some sort. I recall a couple years ago, maybe around the 2020 election or maybe even before that, she does some shit where she just bitches all the time about money and politics or something like that. The general, room temperature IQ
Surface
opinion
level
that everybody has, right? That doesn't even remotely address, let alone understand the root cause of what's really going on with the abuse of government power. She has no care in the world for that, but she cares about all the catchy stuff, right? She cares about gerrymandering and people paying for politicians and blah, blah, blah. All of the symptoms to the disease, not the disease itself. Yeah, she cares about all the symptoms. She wants to put a Band-Aid over a bullet wound. But because she has those opinions, those correct opinions on those subjects, according to, the dolts that, would follow her in droves, she's now entitled to say that she doesn't fuck with you if you don't, if you're not political because politics is killing people. As if it just started yesterday. Politics just started killing people yesterday. Trump was this unique evil which had never existed or been countenanced in all of human history in any sort of government office or position. The way these people think about history just starting yesterday, and that at the time that they decided to start caring about it, is right at the exact critical moment. Right when it tricked off in her mind that it was something to care about, that's when everybody else should have too, and then all those people should have the same opinions as her. That's the only direction this mentality can go if A, you think that political power is justified in whatever form it takes. B, people aren't allowed to peaceably leave it if their political arrangements aren't working. And C, that, you have this kind of liberal progressive worldview where you look at progress as inevitable, and that anybody that fights back against it is backwards, antiquated, and probably racist, bigoted, evil, and all the other swear words you can throw in there. You're going to wind up with her mentality.
Just maybe she should use better verbiage next time than saying she fucks with people, because I just remember what it was called. It was called the fappening.
Jesus.
and perhaps you should stray away from that kind of logic, because it just brings me right back to those pictures. Well, so again, to take my political cues from Jennifer Lawrence, actress, or Jennifer Lawrence cloud hack, I don't know. You go live your life, Jennifer. Live your best life. That's awesome. But don't pretend to be in the know about
All right. Well,
maybe I should watch my verbiage, because apparently you know plenty about that. Anyway,
that's a good way for David to push me off of that subject matter entirely. And with that, we are jumping into the Epstein didn't kill himself segment. And in today's Epstein segment, we have another. I spend entirely too much time on Twitter. This is terrible.
What do we call it?
It's not good for my mental health.
What do we call it? We're coining a phrase here right now.
Well, no, because that was for the first one. Twending.
Or whenever things are trending on Twitter,
David wants to call it twending because
I want a hashtag. Well, if Paris Hilton can claim that bullshit, I'm claiming twending.
All right, let's claim it.
Twending.
Anyway, we have a tweet from Kathy Griffin, and I'm just going to quote it real quick. It says,
Oh, fuck.
quote, yeah, remember Kathy, the one that held up the severed Trump head, and that was apparently chill, but anybody that happens to like that guy, they're domestic terrorists. Yeah, that Kathy Griffin. Anyway, she says, quote, if you don't want a civil war, vote for Democrats in November. If you do want civil war, vote Republican. Now, the first thing that comes to mind right off the bat is that's a fucking threat. She's saying, if you don't vote for my people, you're voting for a civil war because my people aren't going to take too kindly to you not voting for them.
Remember the last election?
We're coming for you.
When they boarded up all the windows?
Yeah.
To protect everybody from the riots that if Trump didn't get elected or...
No, it was the opposite.
Well, it turned out to be the opposite because nobody rioted after Trump didn't get elected.
Yeah. You think they were boarding up all those windows in case Biden won? So yeah, this isn't just theory land.
A lot of Trump supporters in those BLM movements, huh?
that Kathy Griffin is. This isn't just theory or just some brain dead celebrity tweeting nonsense. There's a lot of people who feel the way Kathy Griffin does, and the reason why this tweet stuck out is because even though it happened after we had recorded last week's episode talking about the Biden speech and how the optics of the red lighting behind him and being flanked by the Marines and all that kind of stuff was intentional, and it's intentional to provoke a response from you, is Kathy Griffin would, in the very same vein, let's say the red wave happens, a bunch of Republicans get elected, and the quote-unquote civil war pops off. Again, let's set aside which side would start that, but the point is, she wants you to know that any sort of violence that happens is pretty much ex ante justified because, damn it, you voted for Republicans. You voted for those evil, terrible, fascist Nazis, and therefore, Griffin's calls to violence, either explicit or implicit, are always justified.
I thought of Peter Griffin.
Which quote? Which one? The quotes are endless. I know. Which quote?
No, just like the Griffin's comments. I was like, to the Hinden Peter. It's like I can't bring that. But again, like, yeah, and then this is the juxtaposition too. The person on the left is inciting civil war. It's like, aren't you the side? And I don't know if I brought this up on this podcast. I'm sure I have a multitude of times. Aren't you the side that doesn't have any guns? You're picking a fight with the side that has all the guns, but we don't have F-15s. But Kathy Griffin does apparently. So shit.
Well, but see, that's really the point, and that gets to the mindset of these people, and it gets to why they cheer Biden when he makes that stupid F-15 versus AR-15 comparison.
Protect me, Daddy. Protect me. You're going to protect me?
You're exactly right. Fundamentally, at base, again, if this was a state of nature situation where it was survival of the fittest, these people would be dead in 5 seconds because they are fucking cowards. They are the ones who cheer 87,000 IRS agents because they want those agents coming and knocking on your door.
Because they believe they're going to be knocking on multimillionaires' doors.
Well, or just...
bless your heart.
Or forget that. They're political enemies. They're not going to come knocking on their doors because they always do the right thing. And even more than that is a hallmark of cowardice it's the whole like alligator mouth, jaybird ass kind of thing. The ones who talk the loudest and talk the most, like the one, I think you made it on episode 110, the example of a street fight. It's usually just a bunch of chest bumping and name calling, but there's never any blows that are actually thrown.
The people that know what they're doing don't call for fights.
Exactly. So
Right.
that's what these people are. And that's why they're so ready to say
because they don't know what
things.
true violence is.
Not
Because
only-
they think, these fuckers think silence is violence, for Christ's sake. Like,
Not only do they not know what what true violence is, they know that they're not going to be the ones with their asses on the line to have to step up and do it, first of all. And second of all, it's a delusion. And Lenin had a saying for these people. They were called useful idiots. And to put
Good
it
song.
into the Cliff Note version, basically what a useful idiot is, it is somebody who supports a regime, a movement, whatever, but they support it not knowing the true objective of that movement or that regime. So the reason why Lenin coined the term useful idiots is because a lot of people supported the Bolsheviks taking over in Russia, not knowing that the true objective of the Bolsheviks was once they gained political power, they were going to turn on all their political enemies and anybody who had any misgivings about it, including the people who pushed for them to take power in the first place. So Kathy Griffin, in complete useful idiot fashion, says, well, we got to echo the Biden thing, F-15s versus AR-15s, and we're going to have a civil war. In her mind, the only way she ever thinks of herself as is synonymous with the regime. And the regime is anybody that stands opposite Donald Trump. That ranges from, again, to quote back for the last segment, Hillary Clinton to Mitch McConnell. The establishment, whether they be right or left, the point is that they run this show, and don't you dare ever vote for anybody who they haven't pre-approved. Kathy Griffin thinks that small circle she's a part of, and that if they get their total tyrannical, despotic control of everything and basically wipe their ass with the Constitution as they've been doing for decades, that they're never going to turn on her. That apparatus is only always going to be used against her political enemies. And that's why she has no problem pushing for it to have more and more power and to ramp up the rhetoric against who she perceives as her political enemies, because she thinks she's always going to be in the in group. Well, we got news for you, Kathy. You're not in the in group now, and you surely aren't going to be if that whole shadowy government takes more and more power and more control than they already have.
We know you are a sycophant. We know that you just do these things to get publicity because you're probably going on tour sometime soon. You want all your fucking fans to go out there and buy your tickets and do all that stuff and support you and do all that stuff. I get it. It's cool. But however, like he was saying, you think you're on the in crowd. And like we always say on this podcast, if you light that fire or you swing that door, it's always going to swing back twice as hard. So you start intimating about civil war. Remember that one time that they said Donald Trump was a Russian Manchurian candidate, bought and paid for?
Yep. I think they're still saying that.
Yeah, they are.
Even
And
though
there's zero evidence to support it, and then it comes out that their new favorite president is probably the closest thing to a Russian or Chinese fucking Manchurian candidate that we've ever had, with a lot of fucking information. They're suppressing it. They
or
just
at
have
least
one of the
his
board.
ass is owned by them anyway.
Correct.
He may not be sympathetic to him, but there's definitely some.
They're
dirt
getting
on
a
it.
lot of money off of him right now, and it's pretty troubling. Anyway, not the point. The point is that. But what's everybody saying about Biden? He's not fit for the office. He's really we've established that. So what door do you think is going to swing back when Trump runs again? Because as we know, like we've alluded to in the previous podcasts leading up to this one, Trump is thinking about running again, and they're doing everything they possibly can to legally block him from running again because they don't think they can win, despite the fact that they have the House, the Senate, and the presidency. They're running the fucking country right now, and all they can tell you is that the other side is evil, despite where we're at as America right now. With a failing economy, fucking name a bad thing. Like meat is going up. My steak should have cost $100. It almost cost $200. Like, think about what's really happening right now. What they're telling you, is it what they want you to hear, or is it what you should hear? And this isn't what you should hear. This is what they want you to hear. This is that, like Dane said, like bumping your chests to make the other guy throw the punch and then say he was the asshole, despite the fact that you're yelling in his face, calling him a prick, insulting his wife in front of him, and he reacted accordingly. But then you say he was the assailant. You provoked him. There has to be something there. And this kind of rhetoric can't go on anymore, especially from fucking Kathy Griffin. Is she even B-list? Is she C-list? I don't see her any other time than
got a
fucking
Twitter blue check, so she's an important person apparently.
Fuck. All I see is fucking Anderson Cooper trying to like dust over her fuck ups on New Year's Eve every now and again, and that's it. That's all I know Kathy Griffin from. So again, like, I don't know, man. Like you can't say these things and not be held accountable for them.
So the historical do's and don'ts to wrap up the Epstein segment before we get into the main is, in terms of them trying to provoke you, obviously it goes without saying not to fall for it. And the reason why you don't want to fall for it is because a much bigger, more powerful enemy cannot be brought down. This is the old Sun Tzu art of war kind of thing, right? Where if your enemy has an overwhelming advantage in one area, you want to, as much as you possibly can, take that advantage and make it like a weight around their neck. Take that advantage and make it be their biggest hindrance in terms of defeating you. So one way to not do that, so here's the historical examples of what not to do, is the firing on Fort Sumter by the Confederates in the Civil War, and then Germany in World War I going through Belgium to get to France as opposed to going directly to France. Now, in both of those cases, you had a very powerful foe who did not have what's called a casus belli. They did not have a reason to declare war or turn rhetoric into reality in terms of being belligerent. The Union was chomping at the bit to engage militarily with the Confederate States, but the Confederate States leaving alone was not enough. What they needed was an excuse to go to war, and the firing on Fort Sumter gave the Union that excuse. Just like Germany going through Belgium to get to France in World War I, before that, Great Britain didn't have an excuse to go to war. Now, going through Belgium wasn't exactly the real reason, but it gave a certain veneer of plausibility to the rest of the world for why Britain could then declare war on Germany. So don't do as Germany did or as the Confederate States did and give your opponent an excuse to go to war. Instead, do as Michael Collins did in the Irish fight for independence against the British, where Michael Collins knew that if he went to combat against the British directly, they had many more men, much more ammunition, much more, intelligence, more powerful in every way you could think of. So what did he do? Little things here and there to provoke an over-response by the British. That over-response was oftentimes way out of proportion to what Collins and his agitators would do. And that won the hearts and minds of the people in the middle, who may initially have thought of Collins and the Irish rebels as, too far out of left field, and maybe we don't really want to get on their side. But it's the British repeated over response using that excess power. Michael Collins turned and made a weight around the British Empire's throats, because then it made it look like, why is this big powerful empire doing it to these little ragtag group of guys here in Ireland? And that is what helped the Irish win their war for independence. And so much in the same way that Kathy Griffin, just as more of a symptom of what is really at issue, which is the powerful elite that run this country and don't want you to have an opinion outside of what they've pre-approved. Don't fall for their tricks in being provoked. Don't do something stupid, which then gives them justification to come down on you heavy-handed. Let them do the heavy-handed first, and then you'll win the hearts and minds of the people in the middle to eventually have the numbers to, take them down on your own. And again, this doesn't have to be in a wartime setting, despite that's what all the historical examples were. It can be just winning enough people to your side to where they realize that war is not really worth it.
Or just do what you normally do and don't fucking listen to Kathy Griffin. Anyway.
That's the Cliff Notes version.
Right.
So, in the main part of the episode, we are talking just generally about a topic that we talked about on a few episodes ago when we addressed the political protests in Sri Lanka and Argentina, and as well as the episode before that, the Dutch protests, the farmer protest. And now we have another one breaking out, this time in the Czech Republic, where they are protesting, basic rises in cost of living, government crackdowns from COVID, all of these are themes playing into...
It's a good thing we don't have that going on here.
Playing into the political protests all around the world is generally government either incompetence or corruption or any number of other malfeasance that has the people saying, we don't think that the current regime as it's going is working into our best interest. And that is kind of an obvious conclusion based on what governments have done both during COVID and then also and the response to COVID and then all of the supply chain inflation issues and all the stuff, the policy choices that came out of those things is we shouldn't be surprised at this continuing rise, even if you don't see it in the United States, because as we talked about then, the American media is not interested in you hearing about other less armed populations rising up against their government. They definitely don't want the American people knowing that. But we're saying that it's not that surprising.
Don't plug in your cars. You don't want to eat meat. It's gross. It's not that good for you. You're going to eat mostly bugs. You're
Cricket powder.
You're going to own nothing and like it. Be happier for it. Your general life will be less fulfilling, but guess what? You'll be entertained. And does this not sound like it's happening right now? Like, I don't want to sound like a doomsday clock kind of guy, but like, they said that there's going to be food shortages. And then they start making mandates that we can't make food. So was that the first thing the government's ever got right? But it seems like the government's getting it right because they're forcing it to be right. Like, climate change isn't that significant to push forward people not being able to eat, is it? Like, basic human rights, basically being able to live off of the streets, like being able to support yourself, being able to be your own thinker, being able to have your own education, being able to make decisions for yourself. Like, these are all general forms of freedom that we take for granted, but at the same time, it's all a hindrance to a government that wants you to turn to it for all of your needs, wants, and desires. So, Dana, posit to you, is this the end times? Like, are they trying to go with the globalization thing, or are they really trying to help us, but they just don't know how to do it, so this is the way that they do it? Again, it goes back to that, are they evil, or are they just fucking stupid? I don't know how to read this anymore, but all signs are pointing in a direction. I don't want to be tin hatty here, but it's like, I don't think they want to solve any of our problems. In fact, they want to make more of them for us.
Well, I think this is one of those situations where the stupid evil debate is coming down to a situation where it might be a 50-50 thing. And here's one example I'll give you. During the times of COVID, one thing that they universally agreed needed to happen was schools needed to be shut down, right? Now, that did two things. First of all, it forced kids to be home and learn remotely, which then allowed parents who were also forced to be home from work really get an inside track into the garbage that their kids are being taught in school. And that turned a lot of parents off. So when you see these situations of parents going to school board meetings nowadays and raising hell about what their kids are being taught and propagandized for and all that kind of stuff, that was a complete and utter unforced error on behalf of the state. And their overreaction and whipping up of hysteria of COVID in order to serve other means, like justify their mask mandates and mandatory vaccine policies and all that kind of stuff that they wanted to do, they went overboard and screwed up because they basically pulled the curtain back and showed parents all across the United States and the world that the propaganda that state schools are feeding kids is not something that parents support and deserve, and rightly so. But here's the other thing that they did in terms of the schooling thing is that, and we've talked about this on this podcast a lot, the public indoctrination system is the linchpin to the entire command and control regime that states all over the world want to cultivate. Because first of all, they want to teach kids to respect authority and don't think outside the box. Critically thinking is completely useless. Just take the damn test and get the score and we'll pass you, and then you can be a wage slave for the rest of your life.
And you'll be a good member of society.
Right? Don't ask questions. And, back to the old Jesuit saying, give me a boy before the age of 7 and I'll show you the man, right? That's exactly what public schooling is about, is infect the kids' minds to be state apologists and basically propagandists in their adult years on behalf of the state, right? These are the people who grow up to be Jennifer Lawrence or shudder at the thought of national divorce. That's exactly what the state wants. But it also gives them this sort of avenue to inject these ideas that keep us fighting against each other, right? So all the way down the line, the public indoctrination system is the linchpin to the state's entire apparatus because it raises uncritically thinking adults who don't question the system, go to work, punch a time card, and pay their taxes and die. And they potentially upended a significant portion of that system by overreacting to COVID. So was it stupid that they did that? Absolutely so. From their perspective of wanting to maintain control, the last thing you want to lose control of is education. Or, sorry, I misspoke, is indoctrination. You don't want to lose control of that narrative control that you have on kids from 5 all the way through college. But the other thing is you don't want to tip off the parents that you've been telling, just give us your kids, we'll raise them, we'll instill the values that make them good civil, public or good citizens, all that kind of stuff. You don't need to do that. Don't infect them with your values, parents. They cut themselves off at the knees. Now, was it evil what they did to kids in the time of COVID? Absolutely. It was absolutely evil, unquestionable. These politicians should be tried for crimes against humanity for what they did to children during COVID. But it was also stupid in terms of cutting off their nose to spite their face. So to answer your question more specifically and about all the civil unrest rising around that is just one microcosm of them overplaying their hand. And to use the Michael Collins reference again, they came down heavy-handed and overreacted so much that people are now starting to question everything the establishment has to say about anything. It's not just hashtag the science. It's everything. And now they have a problem on their hands that's leading to civil unrest all over the world at the same time.
Well, which leads me to my next point, which is a good point. Now that we have these people questioning everything that they're saying, we need to get more. Like if you thought during that time, because we don't question the science, don't question them, they're doing the best that they can. Now they're starting to come out and say that, well, we might have rushed this. We might have known this. We aren't doing that. I'm not going to say names, but even Saint Fauci, the god of science himself, is saying that, well, we might have withheld the vaccines. And I might have said that mass vaccination was 70, but then I realized I could probably even get more than that. I said it was 80. His words, not mine. If that isn't enough, like they're never going to come out and go, you know what, guys, we fucked up. We lied to you. We made a lot of money doing it. But we're really sorry. But hey, this is business, baby. This isn't America. This is business. So your health is tertiary to our financial gains, and your rights are only in the way of us making more money and getting elected again. So sorry, we fucked you over, but good luck with all the things that are going to happen to you over the next 75 years. None of us are going to get held accountable for it. And we'll see you on the next CNN or Fox News broadcast. No, they're never going to do that. But what you have to do is you have to have a memory, as Dane says, longer than a fucking goldfish or an IQ higher than room temperature, and start saying like, okay, if you got burned during COVID, if you got your 20,000th fucking booster shot, no hate on you, but just learn. Learn now that maybe, just maybe, that apparatus that doesn't really give a fuck about you doesn't really give a fuck about you. They might actually have other agendas involved in their decision making than your best interests. And this is the learning teachable moment kind of thing, is that, like, yes, we just went through the biggest scare of our history, and that is probably the best thing for us. This is the biggest thing that has ever happened in our lifetimes, and possibly, I mean, aside from World War II, like the biggest thing that's happened since then. And in a time where we needed truth, honesty, and actual care for our fellow Americans from our top elites, they couldn't be bothered. When they're telling you that this is the most life-threatening thing that's ever happened, they were too busy worrying about whether or not they're going to make their profit margin that time or this year. And that's why they pushed you to do things and to do the things that you did. So hold them accountable. Again, to go back to the Epstein didn't kill himself in the culture corner, the people that don't get held accountable are always them, are always the people pulling the levers. And then they get all their little subordinates to muddy the waters and turn us against them. No one here started the propaganda that told you that you need 2 shots in your arm for my safety. They did that. Fauci did that. Biden did that. They did that. Now, I'm sure your neighbor told you that you needed to go do that. Don't hold them responsible. They thought that they were doing the right thing in that time. And if they're still doing it, let them come around eventually, but you're not going to fall for that anymore. They do not and will not, until we force them to, give a fuck about you. Period.
Well, I would go one step further. It's not only that they don't care about you, it's that they showed you that they have open disdain for you. They hate you. They hate the fact that you have different values, different opinions, different viewpoints on a whole range of things. Now, it was convenient for them to just target you for not following #the science, and they could cancel you and kick you off social media and do all of that kind of stuff.
They can't even define a woman,
thing.
Let alone define fucking science.
But now they want you to know that everything, even a difference in political opinion, right? Despite the fact that Jennifer Lawrence wants you to be political about everything, you're only supposed to be political in the way that she and the people that she approves of in the regime approve of. Even for stuff like that, they wanted you to know that they hate you. The trucker protests in Canada, fundamentally, what was that about? Why did they go to the Capitol? Why did they occupy the hill around Parliament? They told you. Thousands and thousands of people all had the same refrain. We want to talk to the political leaders that made policy X, Y, or Z, and we want to let them know that we're upset with that policy. That is a fundamental tenet of Western democracy, right? The idea to address your grievances with your government. That is fundamental to Western civilization, dating all the way back to Rome, right? And that's what they demanded. They demanded to talk to their politicians. And what did their politicians do? They didn't come out and talk to them. They called them just this side of Nazis and probably bigots and racists and all, everything that Canadian Castro called them, and the rest of the people in his party echoed. They have utter disdain for you if you don't fall in line with what they have pre-approved.
Or January 6th, to tack on to that.
So, yeah, not only don't believe these people, but understand that they are fundamentally, and again, you being at odds with them is not your choice. They are at odds with you. You are just standing firm on whatever your values and principles are. You haven't changed. The world has changed, and it has changed against you. And even if you're a useful idiot like Kathy Griffin and you think that the ones that are currently pulling the levers of power are always going to be on your side and that you advocating for cracking down on the quote unquote other is never going to somehow work against you, have a little more foresight and a little bit more historical perspective to realize that that's probably not the case. And that to every ounce of power you give your side to crack down on them today, if it falls in the other hands, can be used against you tomorrow. You know, David's door analogy that he uses all the time on this podcast. So that's the direction it's going. That's why there's civil unrest around the world. That's why a couple months ago, we had former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, getting shot and killed. We had last week, I think former Vice President of Argentina was going to get shot at, but fortunately for her, the gun didn't fire. You know, this kind of stuff is going to keep escalating because the governments around the world are not listening to their people. And not only are they not listening, they are signaling to them on a daily basis that they hate them. The governments and the people in power hate the people that they rule over. And they're playing with fire. And that fire is starting to burn them, sometimes very specifically in the case of Abe. That's not cheerleading it. That's saying what the facts on the ground are. That is acknowledging reality for what it is. So, you know, there's no government politicians or other than the NSA or any bureaucrats listening to this podcast, but we would tell you to run this up the chain of command. Tread lightly because you are acting like the grasshoppers in a bug's life. There's a lot more of us than there are of you. Maybe start working together as opposed to treating us like your mortal enemies.
I like the analogy. And to use that playful analogy and sugarcoat that jagged little pill you just tried to shove down their throat. I think this is actually a good moment because now we're on the back end of it. We're on the back end of it now. We can see the forest for the trees now, and we can see what really happened. And now is the time where you can go, oh, shit. I didn't see it because I was so scared and I was trying to do what I thought was right as an American by taking my shot, by doing this, by staying home, by doing this. But then I realized that now I'm more in control of them, that I followed all their mandates. And now my life looks completely different than what it did before I went in. And there's a good chance that they knew that this thing wasn't what they were saying it was. Maybe not the first 6 months, but definitely after that. So they might have turned against me and used all of my fear, which is a common practice, and against me, and maybe do things that I wouldn't necessarily have done otherwise, other than a huge pandemic situation, life or death situation that they made it sound like. And now from here on out, I'll be wiser. I'll question things. I'll be a little slower to jump to my conclusions, and maybe I'll start making sense of this world and start holding them accountable instead of my neighbors accountable for what they do to me, for what the Capitol Hill does to me, not my neighbors. But I can only hope.
I couldn't agree more.
But all that being said, Dane,
we hope that cooler heads prevail.
Yep.
For all of us.
We're a peaceful podcast.
Yeah, because although, David and I aren't exactly the Jocko Willenick types in terms of like having seen and dealt with that kind of stuff directly enough to know that it's not something that we want, we're not cheerleading for. We understand the point that he's trying to make when he says stuff like that. You know, like those who have seen a fight are not asking for a fight. You know, it doesn't have to go that way. And
none of us want that. None of us want that.
But the more and more the whole F-15 versus AR-15, and if you don't vote for my side, you're asking for civil war, and that sort of
if
general
Donald
mentality.
Trump would have said that, your buttholes would have cinched so tight we would have heard it across the world. It would have been a collective.
That rhetoric just needs to tone down because, again, you don't want that to become a reality. You just don't.
None of us do.
Nobody does. So, to any extent that our megaphone, as small as it is at this point, hopefully bigger in the future.
109th Australian podcast.
Hey, there we go.
Political.
To any extent that
Making
our
this
little
shit up.
megaphone can add to the discussion to let the cooler heads prevail, I feel like we have done our civic duty.
So, Dane, now that we've completed our civic duty for the week, where could they find this podcast?
You can find this podcast at wndpodcast.com/111. They can find it on any podcast app. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. They can get the videos on Rumble, YouTube, and Odyssey, and they can link up with us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. If you would like to support the show, go to wndpodcast.com and go to the Support Our Work tab, or under the description on these videos, you can find links to support us. One-time donation, monthly donation, send us some Bitcoin, any way that works for you. And always
help us get the message out.
We just absolutely appreciate your support, your likes, your subscribes, your
comments,
thumbs up. You're telling friends and family about us to get more listeners and
my shirts are too tight or his glasses are crooked, whatever the fuck you want to tell us.
Anything you do is much, much appreciated. We thank you for your service in terms of expanding the sane space and contributing to it. And with that being said, David, 112 coming up next week.
If we're still alive.
We know nothing about Hillary Clinton and we are not suicidal.
Never. I'm close enough to death. Got a year closer to it this week. But other than that, cheer up. It's not so dark right now. Stay alive, stay clear, stay safe, and most importantly, stay free.